Hello everyone and welcome to our workshop on finance for young women. I see we already have some people joining us. That's great. Thank you so much for being here. We're very excited about this workshop.
Thank you, Elisabeth. Hello everyone, it's great to be with you here today. My name is Sugalada and today I'll be talking about Private Financing Advisory Network, PFAN, a program hosted by UNIDO and REAP. Next one, please, Elisabeth. So what we do, the Private Financing Advisory Network is a global network of climate and clean energy financing experts that are offering free business coaching and investment facilitation to entrepreneurs developing climate and clean energy projects. It's a donor-funded program, so thanks to our donors, we are able to offer these services to entrepreneurs for free. And PFAN exists aiming to address what we call the missing middle between the entrepreneurs and investors. In markets that we operate, we observe that the problem is not necessarily the lack of finance available, but rather linking the entrepreneurs with the investors. While entrepreneurs experience lack of access to financing and being able to approach the investors and speak their language, let's say, investors indicate that they have limited supply of quality projects that are matching their criteria. And with PFAN services, entrepreneurs are supported to create projects appealing to investors and be able to meet investors on local and global scale. And how does it work? Next slide, please. So the process with PFAN starts with open-ended call for projects. So the project developers, the entrepreneurs can submit their projects anytime all around the year. And if the project is selected, we appoint an expert advisor from our network to provide one-to-one dedicated advice to help the entrepreneur to refine their business model, their business plan and financial models. And once the entrepreneurs are ready, PFAN introduces them to suitable investors and provides further support throughout the way to make the deal happen. I would like to make an important point here. As PFAN, we are not offering financing or grant ourselves. We are offering this advisory and investor introductions to facilitate the investment. Next slide, please, Elisabeth. So we accept applications from 122 countries, and the map gives an overview on the coverage that we have. But the country concerns the location of the project. So you can also be an entrepreneur headquartered somewhere outside this scope, let's say in Europe, but having a project in Africa or Asia, and you should be still considered eligible in terms of the geographical scope. And within that scope, we have 130 climate and clean energy finance experts. And through that advisory provided by the experts, we have supported 159 projects to raise financing. And soon we are proudly to celebrate our milestone of leveraging $2 billion investment, leveraged by PFAN supported projects. Now I would like to talk a bit about the gender aspect. As PFAN, we recognize that it's not only a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity to contribute towards the equality of gender and the women's empowerment in energy and climate. From the development aspect, we see that energy access, gender, and climate are deeply connected in the development agenda, as women are disproportionately affected by the polluting energy resources and also impacts of the climate change. And in terms of the sector focus, let's say, studies are showing that women are underrepresented in climate and energy sectors and face even more challenges when it comes to raising finance and access to investment. But gender aspect is not only important for the development side. There is a great opportunity to pursue gender equality and women's empowerment because there is a strong business case for gender. And we see it with the increase of the gender lens investing. And with gender lens investing, we're talking about deliberately integrating the gender aspect in the analysis and the decision making of investments. And gender lens investing is growing because it does make strong business sense in addition to the development impact it has. There are increasing number of studies that are showing that gender diversity in leadership and also in the workforce is bringing higher success, more financial returns, and sustainable growth. And from PFund side, we are working to encourage the projects supported by PFund to be aware of this gender aspect and be gender responsive. And we help them to demonstrate this business case for gender, and also encourage investors and partners to be aware of this important topic and also the opportunity that it brings. Next, please. And finally, if you're an entrepreneur in climate and clean energy domain and looking for support in raising finance, I encourage you to have a look at these eligibility criteria and useful links that I listed in the next two slides of this presentation, which will be shared with you, available at the website, and also to visit the website pfund.net. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your attention. Thanks a lot for listening, and I wish everyone a great event, and see you at the Q&A. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Elisabeth.
Thank you so much. And you know, the work PFund is doing and to learn that incorporated throughout the program. That's really amazing. Now, before we our next presentation, we would also really like to get to know our participants a little bit better. And so I'm going to share a poll with you. And for all, we like to know if you are joining us. The poll. And then the first question is, where do you come from? Are you from the African, the region, East Asian region? Are you joining us from Europe?
Muted, Elisabeth, sorry.
Elisabeth, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm quickly jumping in until Elisabeth has resolved her issues. Can somebody in the chat maybe just let me know if you see the poll, if it has appeared for you? Or from the panelists to you, Esther or Monica, did the poll appear for you?
When we click the poll section, we are able to see the questions.
Okay, but the participants, I think not yet.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to fix the technical issues, just a second. Okay. Esther, maybe you could go on with your presentation until we have sorted out the poll and Elisabeth is back, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Katharina. So my presentation today is going to be on investor readiness. And we're just going to be looking at how then do you get ready for investments? How do you prepare yourself as a company, as a startup? How do you prepare yourself to get funding? Let's go to the next slide, please. So my name is Esther Kahoko from Private Equity Support, a women-led and owned advisory firm. We work with SMEs to help them get finance, get ready for financing, or also reposition for growth. We've worked so far with 117 SMEs across 17 African countries, and I'm happy to be here and make my presentation to you. Next slide, please. My presentation today is going to focus on 4 factors. How do you get ready for investment? What sort of investors are available out there? How do you engage these investors? And which people within the sector facilitate access to finance? Next slide, please. So how then do you get investor ready? First things that investors want to see is your business plan. Do you have a plan of what you're going to do? Do you know what you're doing now and what you want to achieve in future? Do you know how much money you need to be invested, in what form, and how you'd use it? Secondly, you need to know your investor. You need to know what their sources of capital are, what sectors are they interested in, what are their terms and conditions, what are their track record. So it will just be you finding out who are the investors out there, are they suitable for you, and how can you get to them. Then thirdly, you need to prepare your pitch. Your pitch is what you're going to use to pitch your idea to the investors. Why then is this important? It's important because it will help you as an entrepreneur to raise the right amount and structure of capital. It will help you also to better align yourself with your investor, because if you research upon your investor, then you'll be able to know which investor is suitable to your needs. And then also it will help hasten the process of investor engagement because you're already prepared. So then what do the investors expect? They expect you to get good deals from you. Then how do you formulate the good deals? You should have a great team in place to execute. You should have a resilient business model. You should have a capacity, and you should also present to the investor with a path to exit. Then what do they expect in return? They expect a return on their investment, either in terms of dividends or capital gains. Next slide, please. So who are the types of investors out there, and what sort of financing do they offer? So you can either go straight to the loans. There's the banks, the MFIs, the SACCOs, they give small loans to start up projects. You can go to venture capitalists, which are organized groups of investors who invest in projects that are starting up or in whatever stage of your business. You can go to angel investors. An angel investor can be even your relative, can be your friend, can be your family. You can go to that. They can give you funding rounds from Series A, B, C, depending on the stage of your business. So if you're just starting up, you may really go for pre-seed funding, which is probably just a little amount to help you cover your cost. You may go to Series A, B, which is more advanced in terms of where you are, in terms of your business, what level you're in. You can join accelerator program, incubator programs, all available to help you access finance. Next slide, please. Great. So you're ready for investment. You know the investors out there, but then how do you engage them? First, it's the initial contact. You've seen all the investors that are available. Make a short list. I will contact A, B, C, and D. Find out, what do these investors want? What sort of documentation do they need from you? Then provide the information that they need. Reach out to them. Engage in pitch sessions. See if you are aligned with these investors. Then what will happen? The investor will commence the initial screen. So they want to review the opportunity. What are you offering them? What are you giving them in return for their money? Then you'll come to understand what are the terms, what are the conditions of the investment, what are the engagement terms. From there, the you if you're a good fit and perform due diligence. This is where the investor is checking. Are you financially ready? Are you commercially ready? How is your reputation? How is your legal? Are you is your product going to go into the market and get market share? What are you offering? What stage are you on? After that, if all these align together with the investor, then comes the negotiations. Depending on how powerful of a negotiator you are, you'll be able to either get the deal you want or get a sort of a change deal a bit, but then that's the point where you negotiate with the investor. Next slide, please. Great. So what documentation is an investor looking for? First, when you approach an investor, you need to have a pitch deck. A pitch deck is a summary of your business. You're saying to the investor, I have summarized my business. This is what I'm doing. This is what I plan to do. These are my financials. These are my projections. The investor, just by looking at that document, he or she is able to see whether you're a fit. Secondly, if that's okay, then he'll ask for further information, such as your historical and current financial statements. Remember, some have to be audited. He will also need to see your business plan or your information memorandum saying what you're going to do and what you've already done. And finally, he or she will ask for your projections, financial projections specifically. This will help in the valuation of your company, so that if you're asking for X dollars, then how much are you saying your company is worth? Then if this all check in with the investor, then you're good to go and ready for investment. The next slide, please. Thank you. So you're ready, you have identified your investors, you have your documentation, then how do you access them? These are links to people who facilitate access to finance. They may not be the one directly investing, but there are people who facilitate. And as you can see rightfully there, as Jugu said, PFAN is there on that list as a facilitator of investment. So they will help you get ready. They will introduce you to investors, and you will be able to get your funding. And as I conclude, I have a short video that I have put there that will be available to you, and you can watch about the real reason women raise less funding. Thank you very much. And that's my end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Esther. I hope everyone can hear me again. Really sorry about these technical issues. That's great. Thank you. Before we move on, presentation, Monica. The questions you. I'm me. And we will see. Go back to the poll. Monica, please, the floor.
Monica, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Hello? Okay. Sorry for that. slight issue with my microphone. So first, I would like to start by thanking the other panelists. I very much agree with the the issues they raised and the points they stressed on. It's important that companies are financially and commercially ready before they approach investors. So my title today is I founded a startup. Now I'm not just talking about me, but also those who are today with us. Perhaps you founded a startup, or maybe you're planning to establish a startup. These are some of the key things that you should know about raising funding. Elisabeth, could we go to the next slide? So the first question is my company a startup? Definitely after you've registered your company, maybe after a year, you might still consider yourself a startup. Actually, financiers, either investors or banks, will look at your cash flow analysis. They'll look at your cash flow to determine if you're a startup. Now, cash flow simply means, for example, operating cash flow is looking at the money you're using to produce your goods and services to your customers, but also the cash you receive from your customers. And if you're a startup, usually your cash flow for the operating part will be negative or very low. And for the investing part concerns long-lived assets, for example, PPE, which represents plants, properties, and equipment. If you're a startup, that part will be negative. And for the financing cash flow, this concerns the funds you've received from your investors or from creditors. And usually for startups, we see large fluctuations. Now, the objective of every new company is to move from being a startup to becoming a profitable company. And as a profitable company, we'll be looking at a positive operating cash flow. This is very key because banks will be looking at it to determine if to invest in your business, and investors will be using it to value your business. As of course, for investing cash flow as a profitable business is still going to be negative, but for financing cash flow, it might be positive, negative, or neutral. So let's go to the next slide, Elisabeth. Well, I don't know if the polls are now working, but the idea was to find out from the audience today, how soon do you think as a startup you should start looking for external financing? Elisabeth, would you want to try it again, or should we move forward without the poll? For those who are in the audience, could you go to your polls tab? If you go to your polls tab, we have a question, and the question is, how soon should founders of a startup start looking for external financing? Could we give ourselves 2 seconds to respond to that? So the options we have there is as soon as you have an idea on paper, within the first year of operating at least, once you start making some profit, once you're ready. Now, let's go to the next slide. I believe the poll is not working. Unfortunately, this was supposed to be an interactive session. Elisabeth, could you go to the next slide, please? Sources of funding. So, sources of funding, the question here is, as a startup, what would be your preferred first option to raise funds for your company? And although we're supposed to have a poll on this, I think I'll just go ahead into it and say that your preferred first option should be founder's equity. You, as the founder of your company, you're the most important investor. You're the first who believes in that idea, and you're the one who will make it work. So even before you start approaching external investors, before you start approaching banks, you are the first investor who can provide affordable financing to your project, to your venture. And of course, Elisabeth talked about reaching out to Esther talked about reaching out to your parents, your family and friends. You can get affordable financing from them. And after you as an investor of your company, you've invested in it, there's also the option of finding co-founders. Now, this could be people who you created the idea with, or this could be people who believe in your idea and would like to join you as co-founders. I would like to stress that you need to vet your co-founders. Don't be too much in a hurry to sign a co-founding agreement. You need to spend some time, I'm talking about 6 months to 1 year, working with this person, because the management team of your company will determine the success of that company. I myself, I spent close to six months and a year to determine who to take on as a co-founder. And the first person I was vetting as a co-founder wasn't ready to put in sweat equity. Sweat equity means that the person is working, and instead of you paying experts to do XYZ, your co-founders are the ones putting in their time and money to make sure the business becomes a success. So you need to vet your co-founders, and you need to be sure that they are willing to put their time and money into the business. They are willing to put skin into the business. Now, the other option of affordable financing is your income, the income from your operations. After you've produced and sold your goods and services, this should be used in running your business and expanding as well. The other part concerns grants. Grants are really important because you're not going to be paying anybody back. You don't have so much obligations on how to use the money. It gives you room to grow. It gives you room to understand your business. It gives you room to make mistakes, rather than if you are working with external investors and creditors. Now, the other part of my slide, investors. It's very important that when you reach out to investors, you are intentional. You have an idea of why you're reaching out to them, because of the issues on equity dilution. Equity dilution occurs when you've issued new shares from your company to get new investors. And as a result of issuing those new shares, your existing investor and you as a founder, your ownership in the company dilutes. It becomes smaller, and your voting rights as well in the company becomes less. Let's take an example. Assuming you have 10 shares. So you and your co-founder, you've shared these five shares each, meaning that you have 50% ownership of the company. Your co-founder has 50% of the company. If you go ahead to issue extra shares, about 10 extra shares, and you have an investor who buys up that 10 shares, it means that your company now has 20 issued shares. 50% of your company now belongs to the investor, and 25% belongs to you, and the other 25% to your co-founder. So as you can see, your ownership of the company has been diluted, as well as your voting power in the company. So you need to be strategic when you reach out to investors, because just simply adding investors into your project may not be the most affordable way to raise capital for your business. Now, investors are really smart. They have several ways of protecting themselves against equity dilution. For example, investors could go for convertible preferred stocks. Now, I'm not going to go into the technicalities of this, but what this means is that the investor is protected, and you're the one who takes the heat from adding investors to your company if there is no profit increase as a result of adding new investors. So when you go out to get investors, you need to be sure that by having new investors, you increase your profit. So perhaps you are buying out a competitor, you're going into a new market, you're launching a product. This helps you to stand out in your business and continue to have your place in that business. The other option concerns approaching banks. Now, banks are interested in, can you pay me back my money? Of course, most times I see entrepreneurs going for banks first, because if you can get affordable loans from banks, it helps you to increase your operations and your profit and still maintain a good ownership of your business before you are ready to reach out to investors. There are 5 things, we call them the 5 C's, that banks will look at when they are reaching out to you, when they are considering you for loans. This includes your character, your capital. They want to know if you can provide collateral. They want to look at the conditions. Do you know what you're using the money for? And at the end of the day, the idea is, can you pay me back? Now, I could go into asset financing. I'm happy to discuss that during the question and answer session. Let's go to the next slide. So I won't go into each of these slides because luckily for us, Esther and Dugu have talked about some of the things you need to look at in order to prepare yourself to get some either loans or equity investment. But for me, one of the key things I see is entrepreneurs not knowing what they want the funds for. They don't have a financial model, so they are approaching financiers and they keep on changing how much they need. You need to have a good financial model that shows what you're using the money for and how payments will be made. Let's go to the next slide. This is really important because as a founder, whether you're female or male, the results of negotiation might differ. What we see is that female founders sometimes do not, negotiate favorable terms for themselves. This has nothing to do with the female founder's capacity to negotiate for herself, but most times there's a perception, a feeling that if you're a hard bargainer as a female, you might be penalized for it. You might be treated bad for it. And it is true, according to this Harvard study, hard bargainers that are female tend to be shied away in the sense that people don't want to work with you because they feel you're too aggressive, because women ought to be nurturing and, more interested in communal interest than a personal interest. And what this study says is that women who are negotiating from a position of power, they are not penalized. What this means is that if you are perceived as a knowledgeable woman, a woman that has achieved something, you can bargain in a hard way without being penalized for it. Now, I would have liked to go more into this topic, but I think we can cover that in our Q&A. Thank you very much for listening. Elisabeth, that's all from my side. Thank you.
Okay, I will be jumping in until Elisabeth has managed to reconnect. It seems she has some internet connection issues. Maybe now for the question and answers, I can ask Esther and Hugo to also switch on her camera. And I stop sharing the screen so we see everyone big. That's great. Okay. I see there are not yet any questions in the Q&A in the or in the chat. So please, everyone, feel free. And until we get some questions, please, I would like to ask everyone to go to the polls section and answer the polls. I will give maybe 1 more minute to everyone to answer the questions. The first question is, as a founder, what is your preferred first option for funding your startup? The second question is, how soon should founders of a startup start looking for external funding? The third question is, what kind of barriers did you face to access funding? We have listed there a lot. For example, financiers, investors did not understand my business, or financial barriers such as lack of collateral that has been mentioned in the presentation of Monica and Esther, or lack of knowledge on funding opportunities. So here, please choose what you think are the most important for yourself. The next question is, have you already secured some external funding? Or have you tried? The next question is, are you looking for financing for a project or for a startup? So more projects such as an initiative or a startup, a real company that you're going to fund. And the last question is, where do you come from? So we would like to learn a bit more about your background if possible. I'm looking into the chat box and also whether Elisabeth managed to rejoin, but I can't see her. There's one question about crowdfunding. What do you think? Is there anybody, Esther, Monica, or Hugo, who would like to respond on the importance of crowdfunding for sustainable energy projects and initiatives?
Thank you. I think I'll respond to that. And so crowdfunding was actually one of the sources listed in my presentation. And mostly you'll find that sometimes as an entrepreneur, you have an idea, but you don't have the finances to even put that idea into work. If you're developing a product, you don't have the finances to do that. And you'll find that there are websites such as Kickstart, Indiegogo, which help you. You put your idea into that, and then people will finance you to develop your product or your service. So that's also an option that is available, and we can share links to those websites that will assist you with crowdfunding. So it's quite a viable option, depending on what you're looking for and the stage of your business.
Thank you very much, Esther. Anybody else who would like to comment on that, Hugo or Monica? I think Monica unmuted herself, please.
Yeah, I saw the question on from Paula. I'd like to talk about that on negotiation as a female. Okay, so according to the study that I will be sharing after my presentation, female founders, early stage female founders, after making their pitch to investors, they received less from investors compared to male founders. And according to that study, this is about $1 million. So although the study found out that in terms of education, they were similar, in terms of work experience, they were similar, they saw that women founders tend to react differently from male founders when their financial model, for example, is criticized. So for example, the investor might say, I don't believe in your projections, I don't believe in the assumptions you use. What the study said is that male founders will immediately react. They will, strongly object to the investor and say, no, we've used, market confirmed indicators, etc. But female founders tend not to react in that way. Sometimes female founders, quietly accepted the criticism from the investor. The challenge here is that if you do not react strongly, you make it look like your financial model is not very strong. And that immediately looks like you've overvalued your company. So these are some of the challenges that happen. But if you as a female founder, you immediately react using key points, using key information to show that you know what you're doing. You're a successful woman, you're well experienced, that immediately increases your position of power. And as a female founder in negotiating, you should be ready to walk away. If the deal is not comfortable for you, be ready to say, you know what, I don't like this deal, I'm going out. That shows that you have other options. So be prepared when you're going into a negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. Everybody, if you want to join the panel and ask your question live, that's also possible. You just need to request for audio and video sharing. So then we let you in and you can ask your question. Until then, in the Q&A, there are two more questions. One is, how do you see integration of inclusive income participation of clients into renewable energy project setup? Is there somebody from the panelists who would like to answer that question? From Jürgen.
I can pick it up, Katharina, at least from the PFAN perspective. For PFAN, while evaluating the projects, it's also very important from our side to see that the project also able to demonstrate clearly the social benefits as well, whether it will create impact also for the beneficiaries' lives too. It's also important, not from the development aspect, also the many impact investors are also integrated at one of the important criteria in their assessments to see whether the project will be able to create impacts, also the beneficiaries, and what is the scope of this benefit would be, who would benefit from this, and how it would be. And it's very important to address these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope again. There is one more question. Screen freeze again. Yes. In a sustainable project where I'm afraid someone will have to take over again. I'm really.
No problem. So the last question here is from Rind. In a sustainable project, so sustainable energy project, where the benefits are stronger on the social and environmental side than the financial side, how can you evaluate your impact quantitatively and use it as leverage for funds?
I'm happy to go for that because I come from a project development background. Before founding my company, I worked with a center where we evaluate projects and we also develop projects for funding. And what we've seen is that in order to quantify something, as you've said, we look at situations where social or gender was not integrated and we quantify the cost. So for example, we have projects where because women were not well consulted, there wasn't, gender diversified stakeholder consultation and planning. At the end of the day, there were work stoppages. People were not able to work. There were protests. This usually happens for large projects anyway. So there were some cost implications as a result of these challenges for the company. So by taking some of these as indicators, you're able to factor into, say, using this as a case study, this is what it costs them by not doing anything. Then you can assume that in your project proposal, that this is what it will cost if this new proposal doesn't do anything. So you need to have different case scenarios. Do nothing, integrate gender. This is the cost for not doing nothing. This is the benefit of doing something.
Thank you very much, Monica. In the mind that we only have 4 minutes left, I would like to go to the results of the poll and would like to ask whether you see the poll results. No, I don't get any positive feedback from you that you can see it.
I can see the results.
You can see the results?
Yes.
Okay, I can see it. Monica, could you help me to explain the results, please?
Okay, so the first question concerns, as a founder, what is your preferred first option for funding your startup? I'm happy to see that the majority of people say finding co-founders. This is really, as discussed in the presentation, this is a very good way to first get funds. Then when you're ready, as Esther said, and Dougal, you can approach external financiers. Now, the other question is, how soon should founders of a startup start looking for external financing? And the majority of people say within first year of operating at least, and just 1 point lower, they say once you start making some profit. I think it's good to say that definitely within your first year of operating, you should start making some profit. So I agree with the two best options. Then, what kind of barriers did you face to access funding? I would say we have two options. We have two options that are the same votes, and that is financial barriers, lack of collateral, and lack of knowledge on funding opportunities. So hopefully after this presentation, Katerina will share some more information that will help address these two barriers. then have you already secured some funding? The majority of people say, no, I have not tried. So I think after this presentation, many people hopefully should be ready now to try. And are you looking for financing? I would say majority says yes for a project. So majority of the participants are looking for financing for a project. And the majority of our participants, at least those who voted, are from the African region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica, for jumping in with all these technical issues. We have 1 more minute left, so I would like to ask every one of the panelists to say a very short word. What can young women contribute to SDG 7? Shall we start with Esther, please? Esther, you're muted still, sorry. Shall we jump to Diogo? If she can unmute herself. Yes, great.
Yes, I succeeded. Well, as also mentioned on my presentation, gender aspects is extreme importance, and there is only a lot that women and female entrepreneurs can bring in, and they can bring greater growth, they can bring more innovation, they can bring more sustainable and inclusive growth. And it is not it's not easy to find words to describe how important it is. It is crucial. And to all female entrepreneurs there in the event at the moment, you are confident, you are good, you are strong. Keep on doing that for our future and for our planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Strong words. Monica, please.
So as a female founder, you have your own experiences, and those experiences is what motivates you. So I believe that by having women, young women trying to contribute to the SDGs, they are contributing from their own experience, either being discriminated in terms of gender or other discriminations. It's important that female founders take these experiences as a footstool to propel them to make changes towards achieving SDG 7. So I strongly believe that the young women here can, use their experiences to achieve universal energy access across the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Esther, please.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. So I think as females, as female founders, as females just in the house, let us embrace investments in energy. Let us not be told that it's for men only. Let us push forward. Let us look for financing. Let us answer the questions as they are asked with positivity, and with a positive attitude, we will be able to move forward. And I'd like to congratulate all the women in here who have their businesses, who are struggling to raise finance, who are struggling to make their businesses work. Keep it up. We are kicking gender inequality in financing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Strong words. So let's be positive and do this together, support each other, women out there. Great. Presentations will be uploaded to the homepage, and now I think everyone can join back to the main stage. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you to the panelists. Fantastic.